Well, good evening. You know what, a few years ago, I used to spend many of my evenings, all my mornings and all my days surrounded by the White House press corps. So believe me, it's a pleasure to be with you. Kevin, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for your hospitality. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be with such a great group of dedicated Texans. And Jim, thank you for all you're doing on behalf of the Chamber, for your sacrifice, for your time, and for your leadership. I had a lot of fun getting to know you a little bit, and talking to you, and reconnecting with some old mutual friends that we have. One of those mutual friends, Congressman Bonilla, great to see you again. Always an honor. And some new friends who I haven't had a full chance to meet yet, but Congressman Farenthold, good to see you, Congressman Canseco, and of course, Charlie Gonzalez. Always an honor to see you, sir. Now, tonight is a night to talk about politics, but I came here instead to make a confession. Because you see, before I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1983 to begin my congressional career, where I worked for 3 members of the House, 1 United States Senator, and 1 President of the United States, Republicans all, I was raised as a liberal Democrat. Thank you, Raul. He's the only one clapping. My parents were proud, principled Democrats who could not believe I went to work for President George W. Bush. In fact, when I left the White House in the summer of 2003, my mother did an interview with her little hometown newspaper in a suburb of New York, where they asked her what she thought about my leaving the White House, leaving President Bush, becoming a Republican. And she said she hoped that this was a phase I was going through, and that I would grow out of it. My father, not to be outdone, my father said to the same little local paper that if his son was going to rebel, it's better I became a Republican than a drug dealer, but not by much. These are the values with which I was raised. I entered college in Middlebury, Vermont in 1978, a proud liberal Democrat. Thanks to Jimmy Carter, I graduated as a proud conservative Democrat, and as a result of Ronald Reagan and his wonderful sense of patriotism and optimism and his views about peace through strength, and the fact that I got my first job and started to pay taxes. I changed parties right after graduating, which makes me the only person in the history of the state of Vermont to enter it a liberal and leave it a conservative. Well, the other important value that my parents instilled in me growing up in New York is that New Jersey is a southern state. So imagine how I felt in 1999 after 16 years working on Capitol Hill when I received an offer from Governor George W. Bush to move to Texas, become spokesman on his presidential campaign. And when I arrived in Texas, ladies and gentlemen, I got there with the same name that I have now, Ari. I introduced myself to Texans, I introduced myself to my neighbors in Austin, and I sure hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes in San Antonio. But when I told them my name was Ari, they looked at me and they said, Ari, is that R period, E period? Being from New York, all I can think of is, well, J-R-R-E. And then things got worse. George Bush, who occasionally has some issues with pronunciation, when he heard my name was Ari, He quickly dubbed me Ari Bob. And if you thought it was hard to go home to your parents in New York to tell them you're no longer a Democrat, you are a Republican, you have no idea how hard it was to go home and tell them that they named you wrong. Well, welcome to Washington. It is my thrill to have you all here. Living in New York, I sure do. Miss Scheinerbach, I miss Queso, and I miss Texans. So thank you all. Let me give you my perspective on where things stand as we head into the election year, because if you think about it, we really are at a remarkable period of time right now. We are some 15 months removed from the last election and some 9 months in front of the next election. And 15 months ago, Americans went to the polls and provided one of the most rare midterm elections in the nation's history. 63 Republicans gained seats in the House of Representatives in the 2010 midterm election. This was the largest midterm gain in American history since 1938. You had to go back 72 years to find a time where America politically swung as far as it did against the party in power in a midterm election, as the 2010 election represented. And now, we're on the precipice of the next election. And when President Obama took that oath of office on January 20th, 2009, contrary to today, he had immense power and immense opportunity and immense margins in the Congress, almost Watergate size margins in the House and the Senate. His job approval rating was 70-10, according to the Gallup poll. And the most recent Gallup poll that just came out late last week showed his job approval is 45, down from 70. And his disapproval is up to 48, from a remarkably low starting point at 10%. And if you're looking for a two-word summary of what happened that has changed political fortunes for such a popular president who so many people place such high hopes in, those two words, in my opinion, are spending fatigue. It started in the fall of 2008 when the Bush administration persuaded a Democratic Congress to approve massive amounts of federal spending to bail out the nation's bank, Wall Street, and the auto industry. Then, upon assuming office, the first act of the Obama administration was to pass a $787 billion stimulus package that was supposed to have an immediate effect, we were told, in creating jobs. And if it were passed, we were told, unemployment would not exceed 8%. It was approved, and the unemployment rate climbed to above 10%, and it's at 8.3% today. Long-term unemployment, meaning those who've been out of work for 6 months or longer, remains the highest in American recorded history. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office projects that unemployment will remain above 8% through 2014. The collapse in housing prices today is deeper and worse than it was during the Great Depression. And since 2009, when President Obama predicted that the stimulus would lift 2 million people out of poverty, instead, 6 million people have fallen into poverty. And then, as 2009 progressed, automakers received another multi-billion-dollar bailout. More money was spent on cash for clunkers, 2 waves of homebuyer tax credits, mortgage payment relief, and almost 2 years' worth of unemployment benefits. Politicians follow the old adage, don't just stand there, spend something. And now, the deficit is over $1 trillion for the 4th year in a row, and our national debt is at $15 trillion. Gasoline, if you can believe it, was just $1.84 a gallon on January 20th, 2009. And now it's approaching $4 in much of the country, and in some regions, where I live particularly, it's almost at $5. And to cap it off, Washington also passed a gigantic health care bill that was short on reform and long on spending. Add it all up, a majority of the country was suffering from spending fatigue. And the combination of high unemployment, a weak economy, health care reform, and spending fatigue combined to create that political tidal wave that changed Washington 15 months ago. And as with most tidal waves, it's now made a mess of things. A divided Congress is fighting. The Senate, which always goes nowhere and gets there slowly, is fighting with the House, which knows where it wants to go, but sometimes it's so split it can't get there. Consensus is hard to find on the most pressing issues of the day, and the Republican primary race has turned into a thing of beauty. This race has turned into a game of musical chairs to see when the music stops who is lucky enough to be sitting in the chair next to Mitt Romney. I have never seen such a volatile Republican field. And as Richard knows as a historian, my party has a habit of nominating the most recent loser to run the next time for the presidency of the United States. In 1960, of course, Richard Nixon lost to John F. Kennedy. Richard Nixon became the nominee in 1968. In 1976, Ronald Reagan ran against Gerald Ford. He lost. He became the nominee in 1980. George H.W. Bush against Ronald Reagan in 1980. Lost. Became the nominee in 88. Bob Dole lost. Became the nominee in 1992. My old boss, George W. Bush, sort of broke with the pattern, but John McCain did not. He lost. He became the nominee. And now, in the absence of Mike Huckabee in the race, Mitt Romney is the presumed last loser, who should be entitled to become the next Republican. And this has been the pattern of an incredibly volatile Republican primary in which nobody has a strong foundation underneath them. And this is why so many not Romneys have risen up to take their chances against Mitt Romney. And tomorrow will be another key day in this journey. If Mitt Romney loses Michigan, he will limp into Super Tuesday. And Rick Santorum may very well become the nominee for the Republican Party in the presidential race. But if Mitt Romney can hold on, he will likely have settled his shaky candidacy and make him again the odds-on favorite to win the nomination. And then, the fall contest. And it's going to be close. A Gallup poll came out last week that showed Mitt Romney beating Barack Obama by 4 points, 50-46. It even showed last week that Rick Santorum was down 1 point, 48-49. A number of other polls, however, have come out and shown Barack Obama to be widening the lead against either Romney, and especially against Rick Santorum. But I think it's going to be a close election, no matter what the case, because of the reasons I gave earlier about the economy. And if you want to get the best way to predict what will happen in the 2012 race, as any historian will tell you, to judge the future, take a good, careful look at the past. The two single biggest voting blocks for the Democrat Party today are young people and single people. In the 2004 election, John Kerry against my old boss, George Bush, single women voted for John Kerry over George Bush 64-35. But married women voted for George Bush over John Kerry 57-42. Single men voted for Kerry over Bush 58-40. Married men voted for George Bush over John Kerry 59-40. And the pattern held in 2008 as well. Single people went for Barack Obama by 65-33. Married people went for John McCain over Barack Obama 52-47. And so, from my absolutely unbiased, non-ideological point of view, I hope that everybody in this room who is young, may you get older, and everybody in this room who is single, may you meet somebody tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me.